Hello, everyone. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July celebration. You know, in light of the holiday, we have a special show today with a special guest, David Shestokas. Now, David is a distinguished attorney and author with a deep passion for American history and constitutional law. He holds a Juris Doctor degree from the John Marshall Law School, and he's dedicated his career to educating the public about the United States Constitution. Now, in his book, Creating the Declaration of Independence, it explores the historical context and the significance of this foundational document. So on today's program, we're going to dive into his fascinating insights about the creation of the Declaration, as well as the recent Supreme Court rulings, Joe Biden's replacement, or if that could even happen, and whether or not President Donald Trump will serve time in prison. Welcome to the Zach Drew Show. All right, hello everybody. I am here with David Shestokas. You know, we just got done celebrating July 4th. I hope you guys had a wonderful time experiencing that and just remembering what July 4th is all about. And if you weren't thinking about the things you should have been thinking about, we're going to be telling you on today's program what you should have been thinking about during your 4th of July celebrations. David Shestokas, it is so great to have you on the program with us today.
It's great to be with you, too, Zach, with you, your audience. I'm so happy and pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
You wrote a book. It's called Creating the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to cover my face so people can see it. We're going to tell you where you can go and get this book at the end of this interview. It's really good. I enjoyed it myself. You know, and I just want to basically just start off, David, just tell me, to lay the foundation, what was it that even inspired you to write Creating the Declaration of Independence? And, you know, what was the main focus, would you say, of your book?
Well, the inspiration is, and probably like a lot of people that wind up writing books, the inspiration is probably it's probably like 10 years or so in the making in many respects, because I am an attorney and I did a lot of, I've been in criminal justice system, either as a prosecutor or as defense counsel for a long time. And about 70% of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution deals with criminal justice, whether it's speedy trial rights, whether it's the right to remain silent, whether it has to do with your right to an attorney, all those kinds of things that people are familiar with from TV shows. And as a result of that, I wound up actually doing a radio show about the Constitution. And in the aftermath of doing that show, we used to do promos for the show. And the promos for the show were called A Minute of Constitutionally Speaking. And we turned that into a book. We turned those promos into a book called Constitutional Soundbites. The interesting thing about Constitutional Soundbites, when I got through with it, I found out that there was 140 references to the Declaration of Independence in a book about the Constitution. And I said, goodness gracious.
And we all know the Constitution. Well, hopefully we do. But not as much time is dedicated, especially in schools, to the Declaration of Independence.
We don't teach the Declaration of Independence at all, Zach. You know, we go by on the 4th of July and they say Jefferson wrote it that day, and that's the day we left the English Empire and whatnot. But we don't really teach the Declaration of Independence. And the fact is the Constitution doesn't exist without the Declaration. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that the Declaration is the inspiration and the Constitution is the execution of the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm. And Thomas Jefferson, he was the principal author, right?
He was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and he is the principal figure in my book, Creating the Declaration of Independence, which really only covers about a month of history. It covers the time from when a fellow by the name of Richard Henry Lee, who is a fairly relatively little known founder who deserves much more credit than he gets in our books. When Richard Henry Lee on June 7th, 1776, for the first time in public, proposed the independence for the United States of America. And it follows from there till about when Thomas Jefferson winds up drafting the Declaration of Independence.
Now, so this is a ministry. I am an ordained minister. IGBY International Ministries is the covering over the Zach Drew Show. And any student of church history knows the creeds. The creeds are, whenever the body of Christ came together and said, to put it in layman's terms, this is the foundation. These are the foundations. And there's a few different creeds. These are the foundations of what it means and what we believe collectively as the body of Christ, as worshipers of Jesus Christ, as those who call themselves Christians. Now, I believe that America, with my whole heart, was divinely orchestrated by God. And I know that God causes nations to rise and nations to fall. And I know I'm an American and I am a nationalist. I love America. But as I study history, it only seems like there's two nations in the history of man that have been established by God. And it was Israel, and I believe America was. I believe whenever we look at the Constitution and whenever we look at the Declaration of Independence, I believe it is inspired by the Holy Spirit. Now, maybe not on the same level as the Word of God, okay? I get that, but I do believe that it was inspired. Now, what I want you to talk about on today's program is there was basically an American creed, a creed that established what it means to be American and to establish this great nation. It is the 55-word creed. Can you explain the significance? And you talk about it at length. This is the main takeaway that I took from this book is the significance of this 55-word creed that you discuss in your book.
The core principles of the Declaration are in the essentially the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That's the creed, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that governments are instituted among men to secure these rights, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And the fact is when we talk about the Constitution, and people say that they swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. But the truth is nobody goes out and dies so that the president can serve 4 years, or the Supreme Court can serve for life, or the tax bills originate in the House of Representatives, or that the impeachment is part of the House and conviction is part of the Senate. Those are all mechanical things. Nobody dies for those principles. The principles they die for is we hold these truths to be self-evident. And the Constitution is meant to execute that creed that you find in the Declaration of Independence. And the truth is those are the things that people put their lives on the line for. And that's how we define our membership in the American community. And so I think when we fail to study the Declaration of Independence, it's a tremendous failure on behalf of both our political system and our educational system, because that is the glue that should be binding us as Americans, much like an Apostles' Creed binds the Episcopals, the Nicene Creed binds the Catholics, or the Boy Scout Creed. Historically, the Boy Scouts. I just recently watched a special about the Blue Angels. The Blue Angels have a creed, and that's how you become a member and a sustaining member of that community, by ascribing to these beliefs. And I do believe truly that if folks did ascribe to these things, that in fact it would be so much harder to slice us and dice us into these little identity groups that both marketers and politicians try and slice us and dice us into for their own particular purposes. That we would more understand that we can move as one group that holds these truths to be self evident.
You are a constitutional attorney. You studied constitutional law. And so I'm not an expert on this, but it seems to me one of the, if you don't look at the spiritual side, because we know that the Word of God says we battle against not flesh and blood, but against the rulers, the principalities of the unseen world. But if we looked at the physical world, it seems to me like the greatest threat to the Declaration of Independence is cultural Marxism, right? Not classical Marxism, but cultural Marxism, which was, given to us after Karl Marx by Antonio Gramsci, which basically looked at the old school way of Marxism and said, people don't really like that this ends in the gulag. So he repainted that barn and he gave us cultural Marxism, which is categories and subcategories and then subcategories on those subcategories of people, right? And,
Right.
then they form an enemy of who is it that rules the elite, the cultural hegemony. And, you're the enemy if you are a white, male, cisgendered, straight, able-bodied Christian American, and they create these categories of people and to divide, right? Because the enemy knows that a kingdom divided cannot stand. And so whenever I look at America, first off, the most important thing is that there needs to be a coming to Jesus moment. And I don't know how that's going to happen in America other than catastrophe. I mean, in studying the precedent that's been set in the Word of God, whenever a nation is starting to turn away from God, collapse, disaster takes place. And sometimes it's not a total and complete collapse, but it's enough to bring God's people back to Him. So that's the spiritual aspect. But the natural aspect is people coming back to what does it mean to be American. It's not about whether you're black or white. It doesn't matter whether you're, honestly, in any of those subcategories. It's going back to what you referred to as the American creed, getting back to the basics. What do you hope, and let's wrap this up. We have just a couple more minutes left. What do you hope that the readers of your book take away from creating the Declaration of Independence?
Well, I think that they should take away the fact that America is based upon a belief system. It is not based upon all these other kinds of subcategories that you were describing and put together, and actually were created for the purpose of taking down America, because, of course, they had trouble in terms of doing things about the proletariat with America, because America has upward mobility, because America historically was a meritocracy, and so they had trouble slicing us and dicing us on class systems. So they tried to slice us and dice us on these other immutable characteristics, such as race, gender, and these other kinds of characteristics that are artificially created. And so if people understand that their neighbors believe that these truths are self-evident, that all men are created equal, then we're starting off on an equal footing there to begin with, right? That we're all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That the governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. People would then understand that, it becomes incumbent upon all of us to participate in and see to the security of elections. Everything that's important to us flows from those 55 words. I think it's also important that there's a few things that are in the book that talk more about Thomas Jefferson. They've gone out of their way to try and destroy the founders because, of course, if they can destroy our history, then they are in a position to destroy us. And I think it's important for folks to know that Thomas Jefferson proposed the abolition of slavery in Virginia. He wrote something called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 that ultimately outlaws slavery in the in the territory that would become Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so I think there's a fuller aspect of what our founding is that folks should know. And also, there's two other aspects of the Declaration. While these 55 words are important, they're critical actually. There's two other aspects I think people should take a look
go
at.
ahead.
One is that they're in the early portion of it, when Jefferson is describing how they're going to announce to the world about their independence, he talks about taking their place among the nations of the world according to the laws of nature and of nature's God. That covers everybody, whether you're a believer or not. Everybody has this basic sense of human nature, and that fills out a portion of the statement that everybody talks about this being a country governed by the rule of law. Nobody finishes the second historical part of that statement, which is the rule of law, not the rule of man. And if you don't start with the law of nature and nature's God, you have to start at a place that's above and beyond man before you can have the rule of law. Otherwise, all you have is the rule of man. So we start at this place that's above and beyond man with the law of nature and of nature's God. And then we wind up in the circumstance where there's the creed, which, again, if it was a secret American handshake, they wouldn't be able to have all this strife between us, right? And then at the end of the Declaration, and it's mentioned in the book, of course, at the end, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And people may or may not understand these days, but then when they were first starting to do this, Richard Henry Lee was the first guy, and that's the opening of the book. He's the first guy to say in public, propose independence in public, because he was committing treason against the king. Ultimately, we describe what treason means in the book, which ultimately means getting your head cut off. The truth is that Dr. Joseph Warren in 1775, in the aftermath of the Battle of Bunker Hill, who was the Adams family personal physician and would have probably been among the major founders of the country, if not for the fact that he had his head cut off. They actually knew people who had their heads cut off when they signed the Declaration of Independence. So I think people need to understand that we need to bring back the importance of the creed. We need to bring back the fact that it was according to the law of nature and nature's God, because that's what gives us the ability to have the rule of law that everybody talks about. And the fact is that these folks they literally did put their lives on the line, and they knew they were putting their lives on the line because they knew people who in fact had their heads cut off. And they try and get rid of our history. They try and not tell us that, because those are the kinds of things that would bind us together. And the idea of many places, or many folks seeking power, is to slice us and dice us. And I believe that a study of the Declaration of Independence, and there's one other thing in the Declaration, this is why they don't teach it in schools. The paragraph after the creed talks about, when government fails to achieve these things, when the government fails to provide for life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and fails to operate under the consent of the governed, it becomes the right, no, perhaps the duty to alter or abolish it. And government schools will not teach you the right of revolution. We have the right of revolution. The Constitution is designed to create a bloodless series of revolutions through elections and other processes. But if the Constitution ultimately fails, we maintain that right. And I think that's another reason they don't teach it, and something we should know.
Are we heading there? I mean, it sure does feel like that.
There are days, there are times when it feels like we're heading there, and that's why it's so important for the security of elections becomes so important, because once we do not have confidence that we're having consent of the governed, the only thing that's left.
And I talked about that, in the beginning of the program as I was setting this up before you came on. that you've been with, Donald Trump, you've been with Rudy Giuliani, you were a part of a lot of the process of trying to uncover this election fraud. I mean, what are we going to do moving forward? I don't know. I mean, it's just, if they rigged it once, can they rig it again?
Certainly they can. I'm happy to say there's many more people understanding how important it is that elections are too important to let government run them. There are plenty of places for people to participate, whether it's as a judge, whether it's as a poll watcher, whether it as a whether it's as I've done, participate in monitoring and then testifying before the legislature, like I did with Mayor Giuliani. There's plenty of opportunities, and elections are too important to leave to the government because there's people who are in charge of the elections that are essentially elected officials, and they have vested interest in the outcomes of the election. So we need to keep an eye on all that.
David, I have a couple of bonus questions I'm gonna ask you. Just what do you think is going to happen with Joe Biden after he just wrecked himself in that debate? But before I do that, I just want to say to the audience that whenever I read a book, I refer to them as golden nuggets. You read a few pages, and all of a sudden there is a golden nugget. You're just like, you're just so glad that you're reading this book, right? There are so many different golden nuggets in this book, and I would highly encourage you to go and pick up this book, Creating the Declaration of Independence by David Shestokas. Before I ask you those couple bonus questions, David, where can they find your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, available both in hard copy and in Kindle and the electronic copy. It's been there for a bit, so you can find it on Amazon. David Shestokas, and follow me on Twitter. From at Shestokas. Geez, I was busy yesterday commenting all about the Supreme Court, all across.
Talk about it.
Twitter.
Talk about it. What's going on? Just talk about what that situation. I've been seeing it all over the news. You're the constitutional lawyer. Set the stage. What just happened? What does it mean? What does it mean is going to happen next?
Well, one of the things that happened yesterday was, or recently, was in fact the ruling on presidential immunity.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that a president, in the execution of his official duties, and they define that in a couple of ways. They have there's core responsibilities, that is situations where the president has authority and the authority is not shared with the Congress or the courts, situations like negotiating treaties, foreign affairs, certain military matters, certain appointment powers. When the president is executing things within the core definition of responsibilities, he is immune for criminal prosecution. Then there's what they call the outer limits of those responsibilities, which has to do with more communicating with the people, has to do with where he's sharing power with the Congress or the courts. And even there's a presumption of immunity. And so it's only when the president is not within the core responsibilities or the outer perimeters of those responsibilities that he can, in fact, be prosecuted for criminal activity. The interesting thing about that is, of course, that we have never charged a president with a crime since 1789. It's never happened before. And so the court never had to make this ruling before. And so now there's all these kind of people running around saying how horrible it is that the court has done this, but they had to provide this definition because of the overreach of the current administration in prosecuting prosecuting as criminals his political opponents.
Do you think that Donald Trump will see any jail time?
I do not. I do not, for any number of reasons. Certainly, I'm personally involved in the case in Georgia, in the RICO case in Georgia, not as a counsel to the president, but rather counsel to another of the defendants, Reverend Stephen Lee, who's a Lutheran minister
Yes.
here in Illinois, which we've done a show with Reverend Lee.
We sure have.
And so I'm involved in that case, but that case is falling apart because, of course, the prosecutor herself is likely to be disqualified from going forward. And once that happens, it's very likely that that whole case will fall apart. The two other federal cases, the one in Washington D.C. and which gave rise to this immunity ruling, and then which is related to some charges that are related to the trumped up, if you will, January 6th business, and then the classified documents case in Florida. Both of those are likely to be gone primarily because of this ruling of the Supreme Court yesterday, or right in this week, and so. Now, my understanding is that he was scheduled to be sentenced in New York on the 11th of July, and just today,
That's right.
just recently, that scheduling appears to have been put on hold while
Till after the election now, right?
while the judge now reviews the implications of this recent Supreme Court case on immunity, how the implications on that turn out to be applicable to what happened in New York. So it's highly unlikely that the other three cases are probably going to go away, and it's highly unlikely that New York will carry forward with any kind of particular criminal penalties, if you will, with any kind of jail time, which is just this has been beyond the pale. If somebody had if, say, a president had gone and killed somebody and shot somebody or murdered them, it'd be quite clear that you could go ahead and do that. You could go ahead and prosecute such a crime. That's not part and parcel of the official duties of the president, right?
That's right.
But the fact is,
go ahead, yeah.
But the fact is all these other things, have been stretches trying to interfere with the election, and it's quite clear that the court knows that. And but the court also knew that they were writing an opinion not just for President Trump, but for presidents in the future, so that we do not go around suing or charging as crimes the political opponents that served before us. So they were, as Justice Roberts knew, they were writing an opinion for the ages in that regard.
All right, so this program's at 28:30, so this is the last question. We're just over time. I know you had to have watched the debate. My gosh,
yes.
It was unbelievable. Listen, I'm in media, so I know how a lot of videos can be spliced up, and the editor can make a video say whatever he wants it to say. And so as a conservative, my algorithms feed me a lot of videos of Joe Biden fumbling his words and falling over and this and that, because they know I enjoy watching them. But to actually see it in real time, like, oh my gosh, this is the man. I mean, he looked bad. He wasn't in his right mind. He looked embalmed. I mean, truly, he looked like an embalmed human being. Absolutely butchered it. And I was sitting there with my family and I said, listen, it's going to be incredibly important how the left political pundits review this debate, this presidential debate, because if they rip him a new one, that there could be a fix that's in. I couldn't believe it. Like, I did a little video late night after the debate, and I said, listen, they not only threw Joe Biden, the CNN pundits right after the program, they not only threw Joe Biden under the bus, they popped that puppy back in reverse, went over him again, put it back in drive, lassoed him up, and took that man flying over the Niagara Falls. It was unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like it. So what do you think? Do you think the fix is in? Is it too late to get Joe Biden off the ballots if he is just totally destroyed himself? Is it too late? And if it's not, who do you think would replace him?
I do think it's probably too late. Well, let's put it this way. It's too late unless for some reason or other Jill and Joe decide that they want to go quietly. That does not appear to be the case. Biden can. They have no way to force Mr. Biden out without his own acquiescence, because
and sometimes, yeah. And in some of the
because the
states,
convention delegates are bound by law for him on the first ballot, and he has enough first ballot. He has enough first ballot convention delegates that are bound to him by law to win the nomination. So the only way they can get rid of him is if, in fact, he agrees to be gotten rid of. And so I don't know that, and that doesn't seem to be something that's going to happen.
And then there were a couple of articles that I was reading that there are certain states that say that even if he recuses himself, so to speak, you can't. You can't. The only way that you can recuse yourself, get yourself off the ballot, is by death. That is the only way. So yeah, I mean, because I was thinking, it's Gavin Newsom, maybe Michelle Obama, maybe J.B. Pritzker, but then I'm reading these other things that are coming out. It's like, hey, it looks like he might not be able to do a darn thing, and the Democrats just know, oh my gosh, we epically failed. We're going to have to reset and go at this again in 4 years. What are your thoughts?
That's certainly what it looks like. But what the shame is of course all these people that are throwing him under the bus and dragging him over the falls. They've been part and parcel of the cover up of this for all this time, for the last few years. That's what's so disturbing, is that these people are pretending that, oh my gosh, this happened. They weren't upset that that Biden was like that. They were upset that the rest of us were able to watch. And
that's true.
And that, from what I understand, between the digital and the online and et cetera, apparently about 100 million people watched. And so they were not in a position to consider the defense anymore. And so they had to act astounded. That's what's so disturbing.
And another thing is this, I like, I play golf. I love to watch, the NBA and, watch all of the series games. And I gave the analogy that America as a whole, when it comes to debates, when it comes to the NBA, a lot of people that miss the games, they at least tune into the fourth quarter, right? Or at least the last 3 minutes. It's the exact opposite with the debates. America as a whole typically only tunes into the first quarter of that game, so to speak. And then they go back to their Netflix series or whatever they were doing prior to the debate starting. So most of America that actually watched the debates, of those 100 million, they only watched the first 25%, which was by far the worst part of the performance for Joe Biden.
Yes. No, that's a fair analogy. I'm going to leave one comment, because I've been watching all the recap and the post game shows and everything like that. And I would tell you, there was a moment actually that touched me that I've not seen anybody talk about, and that is that when President Trump said, "I wish I weren't here. I wish I didn't have to be. I wish that our country was in. I wish that you were doing a good job." That felt so honest and so sincere, and it's been so overlooked by everybody that I think that was a statement about President Trump's love for America. If in fact Biden had been doing a good job, if he hadn't opened the border up, if they hadn't done the inflation, if they hadn't been able to let the wars happen in Ukraine and Israel and whatnot, I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump would not be running. I take him at his word on that, and I think that was a moment that was, I think, very poignant and very missed by all the people that are on either team. That just touched me at that particular moment in time.
I think you're right, because as you see, I think you're right, because as you've seen, he has said before, there have been many times over the last 20 years where he's thought about, should I run for president, and he didn't, because we're it's not where we want to be, but it's not it's not horrible, and I would maybe I think it was horrible, but it ended up coming to a place where he's like, I can't sit on the sidelines anymore. Put me in the game, coach, right? And so that's where he was. I think you're right. It's a very valuable. Those were very valuable words. He said, "If I wish I didn't have to, I wish I could go and be in one of my multiple homes, and I didn't have to be here tonight." Listen, David, we are so grateful for you being on the program today. Everybody watching, we didn't have time to get into the whole book, but once again, go and order the book on Amazon, Creating the Declaration of Independence by David J. Shestokas. There's a lot of awesome golden nuggets of wisdom, of extreme value in this book. David, thank you for joining me on today's program and allowing me to interview you.
Thank you for having me, Zach, and thank you for the opportunity to bring the message of the American Creed to your audience.
Thank you. And to everybody watching at home, we'll see you next week.